So my name is Tim. Thank you for having me here. I've been sober in AA since the 24th of July 1993. I started going to Al-Anon in 1995, so that's 23 years ago, and I qualify for a number of other 12-step fellowships as well. And when I sponsor people, I sponsor a lot of people. When I sponsor people, I share my experience of the AA program and the Al-Anon program and a lot of other things which I've learned from a lot of other people over the last quarter of a century. And it's all muddled in my head now. It's all one big pot of things I've learned. So the things I'm going to say today will come from different sources. It will come from AA, it will come from Al-Anon, it will come from other spiritual sources. If anything I say is useful, marvellous. If something's not useful, don't worry about it. Don't get hooked on it and then miss the next hour because you're worrying about one thing that you didn't like. So that's all right. And I know it's only however many we are, 7 people, if I can count. But I think it's important in recovery not to underestimate what we're doing. How I learnt to live came from my parents and my community and my society. So all of my Anon problem and then the alcoholism and all of the other addictions were taught to me very diligently by the society I lived in. So I'm not in Al-Anon, in whatever fellowship I'm in, I'm not solving a problem that I generated myself. This is the result of thousands of years of dysfunction all crystallizing in me. So we're working against a pretty difficult system here. And in some people it manifests as addiction, in other people it manifests as the Anonism. And if you're very lucky, you can have both. And I have both. I can't tell anyone else's story, so I'm going to be careful about not revealing particular things about particular people in my family. But there is clearly sex addiction in there. There is clearly alcoholism in there. There is anorexia. There is religious fanaticism. There are all sorts of other destructive patterns left, right and centre. And then there are the people that are the victims of those, but then develop their own pathologies in response to those. So, and I had all of those influences around me, and I've gone through my life replicating all of the mistakes that all of the people I grew up with made. I've become all of those people one by one in sequence. Initially I was more on the addict side, and then I discovered my friends who've met my dear old mother, they say, oh, your tone of voice just then, that was just like your mother, especially if it was a tone of contempt or self-righteousness or criticism or judgment. I actually take on her voice. So there's a lot we're dealing with here. And one of the difficulties in Al-Anon, it says in the Al-Anon preamble that in Al-Anon we work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's all very well, but step 1 was written for alcoholics. It wasn't written for the rest of us from the Al-Anon perspective. So you've got a bit of a difficulty there, because I'll tell you one thing: if you've got an alcoholic or an addict in your life, whatever the addiction is, my powerlessness over his alcoholism or his alcohol consumption is the tip of the iceberg. If it were just that, we'd be fine. But all I'd have to do is, there's nothing I can do about that. Oh well. but there's more. And so before we get into any detail about the program, I want to invite you, if you're happy to do so, that's fine. If you'd rather not, that's fine. But to say what brought you here? What problems did you perceive that you thought S-Anon might help with? What's the problem?
I'm happy to be recorded. So it's for me, it was very much the unmanageability of my life. It was overwhelming to get out of bed in the morning. It was overwhelming to do normal things, and I could only ever see problems everywhere. Everywhere I looked, that's just a problem, and that's just a problem, and that's just a problem, and he's just another of my problems. And to me, when I came to program, to have a solution, that was a whole different mindset. Like there was now, instead of being sucked in the mud, there was something to draw me out of the mud. That's how I perceived it. That's what brought me to program. That was the thing that, when I could see this as a solution, that was a big deal for me.
Anyone else?
I think for me, I came looking for an answer to a question I didn't know. I didn't even know what the question was. My life was getting increasingly muggy, and I didn't know the cause. And there was a lot of, it was a dark place, and a lot of emptiness in me. I wanted to blame my husband for it. It was a very private, mysterious, invisible addiction. I didn't see it. So it was like, as a glasses wearer, it was like living without glasses on. I couldn't see anything. I didn't know where it was coming from, and I didn't know the cause. And I came to the rooms, and I found, and I could understand myself more, and I could slowly understand part of him. But I got the answer in a way before I even understood the question.
That makes a lot of sense. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can go. Hi, it's Sophie. I very much echo what the previous share was. I had some evidence. I hadn't gone snooping, but I'd had evidence shown to me through my phone and through other technologies that there was something really wrong. But similar to what I heard earlier, there was stuff that I'd seen in my upbringing that was similar. So I was very confused. I didn't know, is that the actual problem? Well, then I've had that problem already. And there was serious problems all around him. It wasn't right. It was very different. I knew that there was something really not right with him, depression and anxiety, and then the stuff that was shown to me. But now, looking back, like previously shared, I realised that the huge amount of stuff that was going on with me was, I would say, now looking back, it was about 80% of it. Yes, there's the addiction in my life, but it's a huge amount about me. So yeah, keep like glasses on, aware, and looking at myself is what I'm beginning to understand. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
It's getting. I knew about the problem for a long time before I came to program. I think it was my pride that stopped me coming, thinking he's got a problem, not me. But what was a big thing for me was now being in program, thinking, yes, he was the massive problem. There were loads of issues, there were loads of stuff. It was so obvious there was something wrong even before he told me anything. But all my behaviours, the way I reacted to him and the way I reacted to other people because of my pain, just made things a lot worse. Instead of having the tools of the program to learn to behave and to learn to be serene and to learn to tap into God, that's what's taught me. It's not his sickness and my sickness. Yes, he might have his sickness will always be there. It's how I relate to it, and I related to it in such a bad way before program. That really did hinder my life and hinder everyone else's around me. Thank you.
Thank you.
I found with me
very similar to what everyone else is saying. There was a lot of things going on that I thought there was something I was doing very fundamentally wrong, and I kind of couldn't get a grip on it, which was making me feel very, going to patterns that were very unmanageable. And then when I started finding things out, I was just so overwhelmed that this might be something beyond me and I don't really know how to fix it. That I just needed help to kind of get on with my life, to get on with work, to be able to focus. I was in a place that if I wasn't excessively busy or really working crazy hours without stopping to breathe, I couldn't do anything else. So I could come in and hear about the problem and hear that there's a solution. It was kind of that someone was helping me see what's going on and see that there's a place to go from this. It's not just staying.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to come at step one from a slightly unusual angle, unorthodox, if I may use that word. So I don't want to labour the basic point that I know because I've tried, I can't stop anyone else drinking, I can't stop anyone else using. One of the curious, a very close friend of mine was a very bad sex addict, and we would go on holidays together and he'd disappear. And I knew he was going to disappear because his breathing changed about 3 hours before. There are funny little things you notice. Once I realised the pattern, I could tell there was something. There was an absence, and then the breathing changed, and then he was gone, and then he would be back when he was back. And that's that. It's a fairly straightforward thing. But it's the rest of it. It's the rest of the step one, the unmanageability that people talk about. And I think it's all about, in my case, knowing where I stop and the next person begins. And it's all about responsibility. And there are 4 ways that I get the responsibility question wrong. The first way is I say to myself, I'm responsible for you. And if you've got someone that is a mess, and it affects everyone, if someone is a mess, its tentacles go all over. There are things not being done which need to be done. As a very basic thing, you have to pick up after them. You have to anticipate. You have to make excuses. Oh, he's just tired, I've said about alcoholics. As I have to stop his face going into the food and prop him back up in the chair. He's had a long week. I'm sort of embarrassed about those conversations when I'm making up for some. So taking responsibility for someone else. So I'm responsible for you. Now the truth is I'm not responsible for you, but that's the disease says that I am responsible for you. The second responsibility problem is where I said, well, I'm not responsible for me. Because who has the time? Who has the time to look after one's... How do I have the time to look after myself when everything else is bleeding and on fire? When everything else is in crisis? The idea that I could spend half an hour doing a jigsaw puzzle is absurd when everyone else is running around screaming, complaining and falling apart. One of the Al-Anon questions is brilliant. It says, do you cook sumptuous feasts for everyone else, but when you're on your own, you just eat straight out of the fridge? Because who has time? And so my own life going to rack and ruin because I'm so busy being busy and in charge and effective and efficient and the one that everyone relies on, but my own cupboard is empty, and I'm thinking bitterly to myself, when is it going to be my turn? And that's when you start to, ask yourself, where am I going to hide the body? That's when it's going to be my turn, when they're all dead. And so, not looking after myself, and I've this pattern of those two things are very closely related. I'm responsible for you. I'm not responsible for me. I as a good Al-Anon, I do a different career now, but in my 20s, I got a professional qualification, and my job was to go into dysfunctional environments and sort them out. It was to go in, find out what went wrong, set everyone right, and then go on to the next one. And of course, because you get better and better at it, they throw you into more and more complex situations. Just imagine divorcing an addict and then marrying one that is even worse afterwards. And and they're paying you for it, so you must be doing a good job. And I got to a stage in my 20s where I kept getting... now anyone can catch hepatitis once, but to catch different forms... I was going through the alphabet with the different forms of hepatitis. I mean, I don't know how I was even being exposed to the virus, but it was getting into me somehow. I kept getting ill. I was ill the whole time. And I did not see I just didn't see the connection with the fact I was efficiently running everyone else's lives, but could not get enough sleep, was not eating properly, was not exercising, was not doing what I needed to do. I felt as though all I could do was not drown. If today I cannot drown in the responsibilities, today is a good day. And this is no way to live. So these two things are very, very closely linked. I'm responsible for you. I'm not responsible for me. And now, you'd think that would be enough, but there are other forms of insanity as well. It's when I look at the other person and say, you're not responsible for you. Now, this is a slightly different thing. So I'm responsible for you. I don't particularly care about you. I'm just in charge. I've got a plan. The plan is going to be implemented. This is how it's going to be done. Stay out of my way. So controlling and bulldozing. The you're not responsible for you is, oh, you poor thing. You need me so much. There's a wonderful song in the musical Oliver. There's a woman called Nancy who's married, or her boyfriend is Bill Sykes, who's a rake and a cad and a scoundrel. And there's a marvellous song where she's considering leaving him, but she says, but he needs me so. And it's about how she feels alive because he needs her. And so my friend Tom describes this as going through the world looking for the orphans with the big eyes and the broken wing to look after. There's nothing more satisfying than to have their needy little eyes look up to you in gratitude that you're going to look after them. Because you can't look after yourself, so I'm going to have to. But also there's a sinister side of you're not responsible for you. It's if you're not responsible for you, you can't be held to account for your actions, so I just have to put up with them. And I'm powerless over someone else's addiction can easily translate into I have to put up with your behaviour no matter what, and just keep quiet and shut up because you can't help it, you poor thing. And I was taught from an early age to take it. If they're shouting at you, take it. If they're bullying you, take it. Because they can't help it. So you just have to put up with it. And a lot of people shouted at me a lot in my childhood, in the house, out of the house. I seemed to gravitate in school situations towards teachers who would shout, who would use particular pupils as the person to shout at, the person to take out the aggression on. And other kind people say, oh, they can't help it. It's so troubled. Just if you let the storm blow itself out. And I would deliberately blind myself to the unacceptable behaviour of addicts in my life. On the basis of this sort of false recognition of power. So, well, I'm powerless over them, they're powerless over themselves, this is just the way things are. Terrified of setting a boundary, because they can't help it, that would just be punishing them. So there's all sorts of weird craziness in there about when I say you are not responsible for you. And then it gets worse. But you are responsible for me. And that works itself out in two ways. First of all, if I feel something, it's your fault. So I would make lists of all the things I felt and lists of how you are responsible for how I feel. That's what the step 4 resentment inventory is in the big book. All of the ways in which I think other people's behaviour is responsible for how I feel. So I'm not responsible for my emotional life, you're responsible for my emotional life. If you didn't do X, I wouldn't feel Y. And then I wouldn't be obliged to control, bulldoze and caretake. So it's all your fault that I'm bullying you. And I turned myself into all the people that bullied me. And then this is the curious thing. Addicts, and this is speculative because who knows, but one of the points about addiction is it gives you, active addiction gives you access to another world, something beyond the material world. That's why we do it. But the material world, as we see it, is somehow not enough. And it's like a portal into somewhere else. And it's almost spiritual, but not quite. And Dr. Carl Jung, the psychiatrist, corresponded with Bill W., the founder of AA, for various reasons. But one of the reasons was someone who was instrumental in the founding of AA in late 34, 35, was seen by Jung, and Jung realised that alcoholics needed a spiritual experience. Why? Because what alcoholics are doing with alcohol is they are seeking God but looking in the wrong place. That being drunk gives people for whom alcohol really works. I mean, people who just have a drink and feel a bit tiddly, that's just, or you haven't changed reality fundamentally, you've given it a makeover, but you're fundamentally in the same reality. With alcoholics, it puts you in a different reality, a reality beyond. And Jung used this phrase, So the question is, we've talked about these different personality types within Al-Anon, S-Anon. Do you have to pick? No, you can be all of them. I can be all of them on the same day. So just to illustrate how that works, so that the I'm not responsible for me, but I am responsible for you. One is kind of causing the other, really. So if I'm busy fixing everyone else, there is no time for me. So those two things absolutely go together. I'm responsible for you because you're not responsible for you. Those two go together. It's one of the reasons that I have to take control of your life is because you're so incompetent. What would happen if I left you to run it yourself? Can you see how those two are connected?
It's like 2 and 2.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
4 of them work together.
All four of them work together. And if you think about the names for some of these, the victim and the doormat. I can be the victim and the doormat on the same day. Now let's define the term so we know what we mean. The doormat is being trodden all over, but it's saying, oh no, don't worry, I'm just the doormat. It's fine. I can take it. Just whatever you need from me, I'll do it. And not recognizing that you're giving more than is legitimate, and putting up with behaviour which you shouldn't put up with, because it's not respecting yourself as a human being to put up with certain behaviour as the doormat. And the victim, the tiniest little thing, they come in through the door, they've got a scowl on their face, and immediately you shout at them because they're not looking at you right. Like, I've done all this for you and you come home and you can't even give me a civil hello. So like nothing, almost literally nothing has happened, but I react like it's now DEFCON 1 and I have to go to, so those are related, those are completely related. There's misunderstanding about exactly where the other person's responsibility lies, where my responsibility lies. And I can go back and forth between the two. I can put up with terrible behaviour and overreact to small things. And you know what? Those are totally connected, because sometimes it's a very common thing. If you got a power relationship over here where your boss is awful to you, and you can't say anything back, you build up an awful lot of tension and bitterness. And then someone over here does something wrong, and it's only a minor thing, but you think, you don't do this consciously, but you think the bitterness from this other unresolved situation expresses itself over here because it can be. It's the same way that when someone has a horrible, stressful day at work and they come home and they shout at the kids and they shout at the dog because the kids aren't allowed to answer back and the dog is not allowed to answer back. So the tension comes out where it can. So all of these things are connected, but it means that there's a terribly simple solution to all of this. It's tricky getting there, but the simple solution for this, sometimes people say, well, I don't know about boundaries. Boundaries, they're so difficult, aren't they? They're so complicated. I don't know how to say. I don't know where I end and the next person begins. Okay, here is the basic rule. I am responsible for my beliefs, my thinking, my behaviour, my feelings, and my internal life. Right. You are responsible for your beliefs, your thinking, your behaviour, your feelings, and your internal life. And now let's breathe for 10 seconds as we take this important information in. And I think the rest of the programme is about getting that implemented in my life. And now I think it's a legitimate question at this point to ask, where does God come into all of this? God has probably been wondering when he's going to get a look in. There's a definition of pride, and for these purposes we're going to take pride to be the same thing as ego. So pride and ego. There are different definitions of pride out there. The word can be used in different ways, but pride in a spiritual sense, then the definition is, I can send it through to you, Emma, later on, if you like. Pride is putting self in the place of God as the centre or main objective of my life. Failing to recognise my position as a creature of God, placed in a specific relationship with the rest of the universe. And it's that last bit that's so important, is that all of those breaches of rules of who's responsible for what, which is where all the mischief lies, it all boils down to me not knowing my place in the universe. So I think I'm responsible for other people. I don't think I'm responsible for me. I don't think you're responsible for you, but I think you are responsible for me. It's having, so that the universe is has an order. Everyone is given their place, everyone is given their roles, everyone is given their duties, everyone is given their responsibilities, and I'm coming in and saying, no, 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 no. These catastrophes, if I don't sort them out, who's going to? So because I'm the one paying attention, I need to fix it. No one else is paying attention like I can pay attention. One of the tests of whether you need Al-Anon or S-Anon is when you come into a room, do you immediately walk in and scan for trouble? What needs doing is that's the motto. Now, I'm not there asking God, what do you want me to do? I'm saying, what do I need to do for me to be okay? If there is trouble, I need to step on it, I need to quarantine it, I need to put it in a cupboard, I need to sweep it under the carpet, I need to fix it before anyone notices, before I can even start breathing. So once everyone else is fine, I'll be okay. So there's no reliance on God there. And the trick, if my job is to be in my allocated place in the universe, I have to be okay with everyone else figuratively going to hell, because they may. And this explains, by the way, the curious line in Psalm 91, where King David says something like, 1,000 will fall at my right hand side, but I'm going to be fine. This is someone with boundaries. This is someone that, even though he sees everyone else being destroyed, does not interfere with the process, because he's not being asked to. So I don't have to go down with the ship. If everyone else is going down with the ship, it's their ship, it's not my ship. So the job in the program is to find my place in the universe and seek to do God's will, not my will. You see, my will, if I could say what my sort of sick Al-Anon will is, I just want everything to be nice all the time. And it's going to be nice, whatever the cost. And it's this obsession that I cannot rest until everything is neat, everything is tidy, everyone is sitting and behaving in all of their places. And I think the great sin in that, if I dare use the word sin, the great sin is I'm denying other people their journey. So whatever sin, which is the distancing oneself from God and return to God, so that's the journey that people go back and forth. They sin, they return, they sin, they return, they sin, they return. My Al-Anon sin is to say, oh no, they shouldn't be on that journey. I'm going to pick them up from where they are. I'm going to place them where they should be and deny them the journey. So they're not allowed the journey of repentance. I'm going to place them back in the hands of God, and they're going to stay there. And so whatever purpose people are placed in the world, to be given the chance to sin and then return to God. So if that appears to, and not all of the data are in, but that appears to be the plan of the universe. We seem to be given an evil impulse and a good impulse, and we get to choose which one are we going to... Now, there must be a purpose behind this, otherwise it wouldn't be there. It's not by accident. And my Al-Anon says, no, the design of the universe is wrong. No one should have an evil impulse, and so I'm going to fix it as though it wasn't there in the first place. And I can't imagine what God might be thinking, but I can speculate that God might be thinking, I designed this for a reason. I designed the universe such that people are able to get it wrong and then come back to me. And you're messing with my system here. And so when I am trying to mess with the system of the universe, it is not surprising that I then have trouble accessing my own source of power, because I can only, it's like with plugs and sockets, unless you're sticking your plug into the right socket, the power is not going to flow. And if I'm not sticking my plug in the God socket, the power is not going to flow. And when I'm off on my own plans to fix, control, change, God is not going to give me the power to do that. Everyone's getting tired. I think we should have some sugar.
Should we stop for a minute?
Yes.